I would say that this particular clip is something that has helped me. If you have been carefully watching the whole clip as such, I would say that this is a clip that I would advocate more, basically because it helps my purpose, and of course a general purpose as shifting from learning climatology to oceanography as such. Why are the reasons that we need to learn oceanography? What do we learn in oceanography? What happens? What is the conveyor belt? Of course, we don't have the conveyor belt as a part of our syllabus as such, but that's a very important component of learning oceanography as such. The commentator, you must have realized, speaks about that it is slowing down, and it would be very difficult to estimate what environmental problems we would have as far as this movement is concerned. One obvious thing is, he said that the conveyor belt, when the cold waters gradually rise because of getting warm, as such, they get along a lot of food for the ecosystems of the oceans as such. So obviously, a slower conveyor belt is going to mean that you're going to have lesser amount of food that would break the aquatic food chains. And we know that presently a lot of food for the mankind comes from oceans as well. You have countries which are lined along the coastlines, which are heavily dependent on fish. And we know that the fish are dependent on plankton, and plankton is dependent on algae. And this algae rises gradually. Now, you would say that why does it have to rise gradually? Let me tell you that in your syllabus you have a theory called as seafloor spreading. We have done isostasy, we have done plate tectonics, and we have done Wegener as such. You'll see that a lot of nutrition that enriches, say, life systems and even physical systems, I would rather say, are directly or indirectly related to volcanic eruptions as such. Okay, if you ask for an example, I would say that the Nile runs for literally 6,500 kilometers. However, it is only the lower part, that's the mouth part of the Nile, which is enriched of fertile soils, etc., etc. The reason being that you'll see that near, I forget the name of, I think it's Khartoum, where the Blue Nile and I think the White Nile confluence in each other. And one of them, again, I'm getting confused as far as these names are concerned. One of them rises in the Ethiopian highlands. Ethiopian highlands is near the Red Sea, or rather are near the Red Sea. The Ethiopian highlands are volcanic in origin, and it is believed that the branch of the Nile, it brings in rich nutrients from these Ethiopian highlands, and they start spreading downwards towards the mouth. And that's why you'll see that the lower stretch of the Nile tends to be very fertile as such. Thus, you'll see that may it be land, may it be air, or may it be water, they are so intricately related and I would say involved in each other that we generally do not, we cannot rather study them separately. One leads to the logic of other, and the other leads to the solution into something happening into the third aspect as such. And that's why, if you remember, I said that immediately after winds and general things that I spoke about winds, instead of going into monsoons, I thought of speaking about an important aspect that we need to know in oceanography. And for that purpose, I will just start. Just a moment. Give me a moment, and I'll put up the right slide in just a few seconds. Yes, I'm sharing it here, and possibly you are able to see it. Just let me check. Yeah, you are seeing this map of the world, which is a surface map, I would rather say, as far as the ocean currents are concerned. Remember that this is just one part of the whole conveyor belt. This is what is happening on the surface. beneath the waters also. We spoke about, we saw this in the documentary, that this is just 10% of the movement that actually is taking place. But then this is something, why is this 10% so important to us? It's basically because of the fact that it is this 10% uh, rather than the 90%, which is more directly and regularly impacting us. I would say that the other part of the conveyor belt is at any point of time not affecting us, but as we know that that takes time. But this is something that is directly related to atmospheric conditions and physical configurations of the continents and so on and so forth. Uh, that brings us to the basics of ocean currents as such. You'll see that I would like to uh, put forth a few, not observations, but something that we need to take into consideration before we go into the details of this, understanding this map as such. We'll see that there are two types of arrows that are moving on the ocean surfaces here. You have the red arrows and the blue arrows as such. The red arrows are warm waters, and the blue arrows are cold waters as such. Now you'll see that you'll find more of the red arrows near the equator, obviously directly related to the insolation, okay, and the winds, of course. And you'll also see that along the equator, just like this guy was speaking in the documentary, that the arrows are moving towards the uh, west from the east. That's basically because of the fact that the earth is moving from the west to the east. And just like if you remember, we said that wind gets displaced, okay, it lags behind along the equator because of the largest circumferential area as such. Similarly, water also gets displaced towards the west from the east as such. So you will see that barring the 0 degrees on either side of the 0 degrees, you will see now how remembering these currents. You may see a lot of names, etc. But let me tell you that it's very easy. One thing, you'll see that you have generalized names in each ocean, I would say. And secondly, you'll see that specifically uh, the names are associated with the place nearby. So you don't have to worry about understanding the names. And then your question would be, sir, how do we know the whether a current is a warm current or a cold current? There is a solution to that also. I will slowly open up all these things to you all as such. Okay, now you'll see that we start with the basic things, that waters around the equator are seen to move towards the west. And you have two streams of water immediately up above the 0 degrees and immediately below the 0 degrees as such. And you'll see that the one to the north of the equator is called as the north equatorial current, and the one to the south of the equator is going to be called, I'll just place it one. Okay, you'll see that it's written in all these. It's written in the Atlantic, it's written in the Pacific, it's written in the Indian Ocean as well. I'll just mark them out in one of them. That's the Pacific, because I have a lot of scope to write there, because the Pacific also happens to be one of the largest oceans as far as distribution and sizes of oceans are concerned. We are coming to them in a few slides once we are done with the basic things we are supposed to be doing here. Now, that's one thing. Along the equator, we are going to have north equatorial current and then south equatorial current. Now, there is one thing that this particular uh, map, I would say, misses. And I don't know why, but I would say it's an extension of learning for our students as such. If you see this toward the right, if you see this arrow, okay, you'll see that this arrow will have similar arrows in between the north and the south equatorial current. This current is called as the counter equatorial current. Now, why does the counter equatorial current develop? The counter equatorial current develops basically because water is going to pile on towards the western edges of the oceans as such. This water has to go back somewhere. So it finds its way partially towards the north and the south, and partially between the two ocean currents. And that's why this is called as the counter equatorial current. It flows as extensively as the north and the south equatorial current, but the direction of the flow is from the west towards the east. Now, this is important basically because we are going to refer it to a topic in your syllabus, that's the El Nino and the La Nina. That is why I wanted to make a point mention of this as now. What would have happened if the earth was all water and no land as such? Obviously, the commentator did say that it would have been moving north and south, but you'll see that the configuration one, that's also what he has said, the configuration one of the continents, the margins of the continents, okay, they will block, and they will block this movement of water. And that is why you will see that you're going to have, every ocean is going to have its own system as such. But let me tell you that these systems are the same in every ocean. You're going to call them by different names, but there is going to be a very common thread, I would say, between these currents in every ocean, basically because the basics of science remain the same. Okay, that's the basics of liquids moving will remain the same. Okay, now what are these basic things that we need to understand as far as the whole issue about uh, understanding the ocean currents are concerned? Now, we have already started with the fact, understanding the fact that uh, along the circumference of the equator, the movement is going to be very slow. So the water is going to be displaced towards the west. This water keeps moving towards the west as such. And having moved towards the west, however, what happens is the fact that it gets obstructed by the eastern margins of all continents. Okay, remember, when I'm referring to oceans, margins are opposite to what I refer to when I'm referring to the continents. That means that the eastern margin of the continent is actually the western margin of an ocean, and the western margin of a continent is actually the eastern margin of a continent, of an ocean as such. So don't get confused between east and west. Okay, we'll see that the east and west of the ocean is opposite to the east and west of the of a continent as such. So they arrive at the western margins of the respective oceans, this excess amount of water, which also means that they have arrived at the eastern margins of the continent. Now, because the continents are going to block these, okay, you'll see that uh, given the configuration of a particular continent, you will see that it gets divided into two. You'll see that this protruding part of South America here, it divides this. Okay, that one is moving south and one is moving north as such. Now, what has arrived, it is moving along the equator. So along the equator, it's going to be warm. So even if it gets distributed into two, one moving north and one moving south as such, they remain to be uh, warm ocean currents. So one, I would say, learning that we have from here is that eastern margins of all continents I'm saying, eastern margins of all continents in the tropics, that's near the equator, will have warm currents. Eastern margins of all continents in the tropics are going to have warm currents. And as we see, they are named by the place that they are going to flow through. Say, for example, this one here, you have the Brazil current, which is a warm current. As such, that's the southern end. And on the northern end, you have this Gulf Stream current. Okay, now the behavior of these currents in the southern hemisphere is a bit different to that of the that in the northern hemisphere. The reason obviously is in front of you, that as these currents start moving towards the poles, okay, you have a differential arrangement of land and water in the two hemispheres. In fact, the northern hemisphere is called as the land hemisphere, and the southern hemisphere is called as the water hemisphere. Okay, you'll see that beyond 50 degrees latitude in the southern hemisphere, water dominates everywhere except for, of course, going all the way to the poles where you have the Antarctic continent as such. So you'll see that while you have the Gulf Stream current here near the Mexico, eastern part of North American continent, you have the Brazilian current or the Brazil current, eastern part of the South American continent as such. Then you will see that in the Pacific, the western part of Pacific or the eastern part of Asia and Australia. Now, what is going to flow along Australia is obviously going to be called as the East Australian current. East Australian current. And what flows through the eastern part of Asia is the Kuroshio current. Kuroshio, basically because of Japan being somewhere here, okay, you will see that both the names are Japanese names. Now, both in the sense, we're going to speak about a cold current that's going to arrive. Okay, but as I said, we are speaking about all the warm currents first. Okay, then as far as the Indian Ocean is concerned, the Indian Ocean, you will see that they get split along this margin, eastern margin of Africa into Somali current, basically because you have the country of Somalia here, and then you have the Agul Has current here as such. Okay, both of them are warm current. Remember, tropical areas, eastern margins of all continents, you're going to have warm ocean currents. Okay, one in the northern hemisphere, one in the southern hemisphere. So the 6 warm currents in the ocean, in the tropical regions, are going to be Brazil and Gulf Stream in Atlantic, Agulhas and Somali in Indian Ocean, East Australian, and Kuroshio in the Pacific Ocean as such. It's very simple, and it's very logical as such. Okay. Now, just like we saw this in winds, wherein you had these warm air moving from equator to the towards the poles, and we had cold air moving from the poles towards the warmer parts as such. Okay, you'll see that you're going to have 2, not 3 now. The reason, obviously, again, you can see, if you can decipher the reason by the time I come to it, it's fine. Otherwise, of course, I'm going to speak about it as such. You'll see that in the Atlantic Ocean, you have 2 currents. You have the Labrador current and you have the Greenland current. Both of them are very cold, and it is these cold currents that start moving towards the say the lower latitudes as such. Similarly, you have the Oyashi current, which is moving and moving towards the lower latitudes as such. Now, for the Indian Ocean, fortunately or unfortunately, you'll see that you don't have waters of the Indian Ocean extending to those latitudes of cold waters as such. So obviously, in the northern hemisphere, you are not going to have these uh, cold currents of the Indian Ocean as such. Now, what is going to happen? I'll tell you what actually happens and how we need to connect this to the conveyor belt, the overall conveyor belt as such. That this Gulf Stream current, initially let us speak about this Gulf Stream current, which moves ahead, and it is going to meet the Labrador current here. This is where it's going to meet the Labrador current. Similarly, the Oyashio and the Kuroshio current meet each other here as such. Now, if you remember, the commentator was saying that there is an upwelling of cold water and it brings in a lot of plankton and algae, which leads to a fish developing of a lot of fishy waters, as fishy in the sense, not in the grammar sense or the literature sense, fishy, but actual biological sense of fishy. You have a lot of fish here, and but naturally you'll see that that leads to the fact that the major fishing grounds of the world are found in areas where the cold currents and the warm currents meet each other. Okay, that's one thing. An economic reference, I would rather say, with reference to human beings as far as ocean currents are concerned. Beyond that point, it carries on. The Gulf Stream carries on as a warm current, and which is called as the North Atlantic Drift. Now, there is another important aspect that this North Atlantic Drift brings about, as far as the western margins of the uh, western margins of somebody may have put in a comment. I will just check that comment later. Western margin of the European regions as such. Because these waters are warm, you'll see that these areas, which otherwise should have frozen coastlines, do not have frozen coastlines because of the warm waters reaching all the way there. As if you remember, with reference to uh, the documentary that we saw, the clip that we saw, as it goes further, the waters cool, and as they cool, they go down. Okay, as they sink. As okay, now the commentator was also referring to something called as gyres, Gyres. Now, what are gyres? You see that these are circular motions that set up here. Now, what happens is these while the eastern margins of the continents are going to have warm waters in the tropics. On contrary, you'll see that the western margins of the continents are going to have, in the tropics, are going to have cold currents. Okay? So you'll see that the western margins of Europe and Africa, here it's more of Africa. So you'll see that in the northern hemisphere, the cold current in the tropic is going to be called as the Canary current, because you have the Canary Islands here. Okay, we have the Canary Islands here, and we have the Venezuela current further down in the southern hemisphere. So the Canaries and the Canary or Canary and the Venezuela current. Similarly, you go to the western margins of the American continents. You have the Californian current in the tropics, and you have the Peru current. The Peru current is going to be important because we're going to speak about the El Nino and La Nina if we have time today, or else we'll have to move tomorrow. Okay, anyway, I'll come to that later. So California, because of course you have the Death Valley of California and the state of California in the US here. And Peru, of course, is the country along this margin of South America. So again, remembering those currents is easy. Remember that western margins of continent in the tropics are going to have cold currents. Eastern margins of the continent in the tropics are going to have warm currents. Okay, and just like you had the North Atlantic drift, you have the North Pacific drift also. You have the North Pacific. The Kuroshio current carries on further as the North Pacific, and then it seeps down and it comes up as the Alaskan current, cold Alaskan. Just like here we saw that the Norwegian current goes down, and you have the cold Greenland current which starts moving as such. So this is a perfect arrangement of these things moving in different directions as such. Okay, you'll see that the whole movement in the North Atlantic is going to be called. I'll just first remove all that we have done till now. Okay, and I'll see that this whole circular motion is called as the North Atlantic Gyre. Similarly, the same type of motion in Pacific is called as the North Pacific Gyre. You're not going to have the North Indian Ocean Gyre basically because you don't have that much amount of uh, movement and land, and that's why you see that one has to be limited for the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal as far as the Indian Ocean is concerned. Uh, but because you have a lot of water, I would say, in the southern hemisphere, you have this South Pacific Gyre, you have the South Atlantic Gyre, and of course you have the Indian Ocean Gyre. Okay, and you can observe the uh, warm current and the cold current where they are. Okay, and so on and so forth. You'll see that to confuse you, you could have a question like uh, which of the following is a warm current? The East Australian current and the West Australian current. Remember, the East Australian current is a warm current. The West Australian current, however, is a cold current rising up of the Indian Ocean gyre as such. Okay. See, similarly, you'll see that you have the Lewin current, which is a warm current, and then uh, it's basically because of this you'll see that the west wind drift. Okay, if you remember, we said that around 60 degrees of latitude you have winds blowing from the west which are going to be called as westerlies. You'll see that they are more dominant here, and that's why you have the west wind drift here as such, which is countered by the east wind drift towards the further south as such. Okay, these are, I would say, the polar easterlies are going to make their impact felt here as such. Actually, the impact is on the Antarctic continent and it gradually shifts here. So you have counter cold currents, the west wind drift, countered by the east wind drift towards the southern hemisphere and more towards the poles as such. You'll see that the impact of the warm and the cold current is felt significantly in the sense that in the higher latitudes, as I said, that the North Atlantic drift here or the North Pacific drift here is going to make a rise in the temperatures, and that's why, as against the latitudes, uh, you will see that you're going to have a bit of abnormality in the temperatures as such, in the sense that while along the same latitude you could have colder temperatures, the North Atlantic drift and the North Pacific drift are going to bring in relatively warmer temperatures along the coastline. Similarly, say for example, the Venezuela current or the Peru current or the West Australian current as such, as they come into the tropical regions, they bring in a lot of cold uh, temperatures along the coastline as such. And if you have seen the movie Gajni, you have that song wherein you see a lot of sand and sand dunes as such that has been shot here, the Namibian desert here. Okay, the Namibian desert is basically because of the cold Venezuela current, which washes off the coast of the country of Namibia, and that's why we see that cold temperatures are obviously going to mean high pressures, and high pressures are going to be devoid of rainfall as such. So the Namibian desert there. So a lot of interesting things you can relate and correlate to if you are extensively read is one thing. You don't have to actually extensively read as such. You have to be observant about it. Okay, I was once ever since I saw that song as such, I used to think of where this location could be, and once I knew it was Namibia, I tried to relate it to the Namibian desert. I tried to relate it to, because nowhere in the world otherwise you're going to find this much amount of sand dunes and deserts as compared to so near to the seawater as such. So that's an interesting observation that one has to make as such. And of course, you have these beautiful documentaries on Discovery and National Geographic about The Lions of Namibia, and so on and so forth. If you have not watched them, see that you make it a point to watch them at any point of time. You have free time available with you. So this is how the ocean currents, and of course, further details of oceanography. Of course, that is done, as I keep repeating, that at advanced levels of oceanography and higher classes, that's post graduation levels as such, that we relate and correlate these surface ocean currents, okay, to the subsurface ocean currents, and relating it to the conveyor belt and so on and so forth, as said, the importance of both of this. But as I said, that the surface currents dominate their influence on land surfaces and effectively life on land as such. That's why we tend to study them more. But times are not far wherein the conveyor belt would be very important, and we would start studying that also as a part of the study. Say it's very similar to the fact that when computers, the rise of computers, uh, the first of the computers were taught in the highest levels of academics as such, and only to students of physics and electronics, etc. Nowadays, you'll see that the basics of computers are taught at first standard level as such. So as technology develops, you'll see that topics keep on sliding down the academic hierarchy, and that's of course the need of the arts as such. Okay. Another example I would say is this sine, cos, tan. Trigonometry is something that I learned in 11th and 12th, but nowadays I see that trigonometry is there in 8th and 8th, 9th and 10th also. So that's about it. And then, since we have some time, I will just introduce you to a phenomena that we are supposed to be doing as such. Normally, okay, normally what happens is, okay, this is the normal year, okay, and this is of course the El Nino year. Okay, now we have seen here, sorry, we've seen here that normally the Peru current is seen flowing along the western margins. We see the Peru current is flowing here. I just bring it up for our reference. This is how it's flowing as such, and you have the south equatorial current, and of course what happens is in between you're going to have the counter equatorial current as such. Now this counter equatorial current, if you remember, I said is going to be important for us, and we'll just refer to it in some moment of time. Yes. Now, because of the cold current, you'll see that you don't have um, any rainfall along the coasts of the Peru, along the coasts of Peru. And however, you'll see that because of the cold current, you have a lot of fishing that is practiced along the western margins of western coast of Peru as such. However, it may so happen in a particular year that all of this gets changed a bit, in the sense that the counter equatorial current, which you can see moving here, pushes itself all the way, and it arrives at the coast of Peru also. And if it moves faster, okay, now we know that normally if you have two layers of warm and cold, you will have the warm layer which is going to be up, and then because of the density, the cold layer remains down. A similar thing happens here. The counter equatorial current makes the warm current stay up, and it does not allow the cold current to come. The upwelling of the cold current, as it is called, is not allowed here, because of which for a particular year you're going to have, normally it is cold, but for a particular year you will have warm waters around along the coast of Peru. Now, because of the coast warm waters, you'll see that you'll have rain in Peru for that particular year along the coast as such. Because of that, the people here can go for some agricultural practices, and that is why, okay, this cheers up a lot of these things here, and because of which this phase is called as the El Nino. El Nino basically because this happens somewhere in December. And because this happens in December, late December, El Nino is the child of Christ. They say it's the child of Christ. However, we fail to realize that at the cost of agriculture, fishing suffers for that particular year, but there always are going to be some fish in water, so it does not matter much. What matters is during the warm periods, where the El Nino years, as they are called, because of the domination of the counter equatorial current as such. We don't have, we tend to have El Nino. Okay, now. You'll see that there is a term which is called as the La Nina also, which is there in your syllabus, La Nina. As far as La Nina is concerned, it's an opposite of the El Nino. Now, an obvious question would be that if the opposite of El Nino is La Nina, then why don't we call it as a normal year? Okay, you'll see that we don't call it as a normal year basically because though it's an opposite of El Nino, the waters during La Nina are going to be much colder as compared to the normal cold waters of along the coast of Peru. Now, this is a bit difficult to understand. I would say that if the normal cold waters would be around 18 degrees centigrade, as such, during the years of La Nina, the temperatures could be 15 degrees, as such, a fall of a couple of degrees Celsius as such. Now, why is it that the El Nino and La Nina are so very important? It's not that only the El Nino and the La Nina are that important. It's basically that this phenomena of reversal of ocean currents was first seen along the coast of Peru. It does happen in other parts of the world also, but it was then related to excessive rainfall in some parts and say lack of rainfall in other parts as such. If you remember, we spoke about the hydrological cycle yesterday, and that is how we correlate all these, say the lithosphere, the atmosphere, and of course the hydrosphere as such. Okay, we said that the total insolation is more or less the same. The evaporation is going to be more or less the same. So as a consequence, a year when Peru is going to have rain has to be compensated with some part in the world which is not going to have rain. Okay, so that's a very interesting thing. And temperatures also vary. You'll see that in this, the second thing itself, you'll see that while you have an El Nino year, you'll see that you are going to have a warmer winter year as such. Now, because this is a reference taken from an American context, it does not speak about what impact this has in other parts of the world as such. Tomorrow, I'll get you a diagram which would help us to understand what is the impact of the El Nino and La Nina in different parts of the world. And then we'll continue into the other aspects of oceanography. And most probably, we should be in a position to finish off with our syllabus for this particular year. So I have stopped the sharing and let me come back. Okay, please remember that you have to check your grades. If you don't have grades, please check the comments that I have put up in the private comment section. If you have handwritten your URL, you'll have to type your URL in the comments box as such, or you just go back to the same documentary, press the button share, and you copy the link from there, and you can paste it in the comment section as such. As I said, I'm going to compile a whole Excel sheet of all these links, and I will pass it on to you just in case you require to refer to it at any point of time. You could use it in understanding any of the topics as such. Okay, so that's all for today. I have, and we would be ending a bit early, but just in case you have any queries for me, you could very well ask me about such queries. And if you don't have queries,